In a recent video, I did the initial unboxing and had my initial impressions of the telescope that is sitting behind me, the Askar V or Askar 5. I'm still not sure about the pronunciation. And that telescope is a very interesting design as it has in swappable objective lenses at the front. You can see the 80mm lens is set up on the telescope right now, and I have a 60mm lens as well on my hand that we can swap between the two. And the telescope also comes with a set of three back-end accessories. We have the extender that is currently mounted on the telescope. We have a reducer, and we have a flattener. And all of those can be used with either the 60mm objective lens or the 80mm objective lens. Effectively, this makes this telescope capable of 6 different configurations, which we had a look at in the previous video, by just switching the objective lens or switching between the extender, the reducer, and the flattener. And so if you want to go traveling and you're going to be imaging very wide field nebulae, you're going to put on the 60mm objective lens, and you are going to pair it with the reducer here. If you are in galaxy season, as I am right now, and your camera has fairly large pixels, which I kind of do, then you're going to put the 80mm lens on and the extender, which is what I currently have. Now, mechanically, we saw that it was kind of exquisite, but yeah, a telescope can be magnificent mechanically. If it doesn't perform optically, it's meaningless, right? And this telescope is made for astrophotography, even though it can be used visually as well. And it advertises an imaging circle of 44mm, which is enough to support full frame cameras. The camera that I have here is an APS-C size sensor. It is the Sony IMX571, so I won't be able to test the full imaging circle, but we'll be testing with APS-C, which is already pretty big as a sensor, and it will let us see that if we start seeing issues with an APS-C size, then we're going to see even more issues with full frame. Now, I already did the tests. I was able to do the optical tests yesterday evening, and so I painstakingly switched between all 6 configurations, and I directed the telescope towards a bright star that was near the zenith with a nice star field, so we're able to see the stars in the corner. I did this for each of the configurations. Of course, my back focus between the end elements, so here the extender, but also for the flattener and the reducer, is 55mm exactly, using various accessories that I had on hand. I also designed and 3D printed some Bahtinov masks, one for the 60mm lens and the other for the 80mm lens. I verified that those Bahtinov masks are extremely precise. Turning the fine focusing knob by even a small fraction immediately made a difference in the Bahtinov mask star image. And so I made sure that I had perfect focus for each configuration, and I took a 30-second frame for each configuration. After that, I decided to have fun with the current configuration, and I took pictures of M101, the galaxy, and we will be able to see what the results are for that particular galaxy. While I was testing the telescope, I did find a small weak point that I hadn't noted in my previous video, which is the single ring attachment here on the base of the scope, in that I can kind of feel it. If I put like some lever effect on it, it's kind of moving within that ring, even though it is very securely tightened. But in practice, this didn't seem to affect anything in the imaging. Yesterday evening, after my initial test of the optics, the winds picked up. We had 3 meters per second to 6 meters per second wind gusts. It was kind of horrible. I imaged through that, and the mountain telescope did very well in that wind. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's have a look at the optical results. Let's have a look at the raw frames that I captured for each of the configurations. We're going to start with what I have on the screen, which is the 80mm objective lens with the field flattener. Note that I did not take any flats, so you're seeing the field as it is with an unlinked stretch. And the first thing that I notice is that the field is actually quite flat. I don't see a lot of vignetting, which is really nice. And the center stars look quite decent. I'll put, by the way, all of the raw frames linked in the description so you can explore them on your own. And if I go into the corners of the image, well, the stars might be slightly elongated, and that could be a back focus issue, but with a bit of chromatic aberration, as we can see a blue and yellow kind of color on the edge of those stars. But honestly, it is pretty decent. I mean, on an APS-C size sensor, I think this is very acceptable at this price point, but you be the judge. That's why I put the raw frames in the description. You have a look, you decide for yourself, really. And so we're looking at each of those corners, and those corners, they look, to me, to my eye, I am not a pixel peeper, they look perfectly fine. And we have the aberration inspector here that summarizes, I believe, this view more or less. Now, this is the frame with the extender. So we are at the maximum focal length with the 80 millimeters objective lens. And I had some tracking issues, it seems, so it's not perfect in terms of the star shapes. But again, if we look at the corners, there's a bit more elongation, which again might be a slight back focus problem on my side. But it is, to my eyes, perfectly within the realm of the acceptable. I do feel I should be using maybe 0.5 more millimeters in terms of back focus, and that elongation is probably due to the tracking issue. So because of that, I have another one. This one is a 5-minute exposure on M101 with the same configuration. This one doesn't seem to have tracking issues, and if we look in the corners of this one, we see again a little bit of chromatic aberration, a little bit of the stars getting extended, getting slightly oblong. But overall, I feel like this is perfectly decent. And this is the aberration inspector for this 5-minute exposure on M101. Again, raw files will be in the description, so feel free to be your own judge on this. Okay, let's keep going, this time with the reducer, still the 80 millimeters objective lens. And the story seems very similar. Again, we have very nice stars in the center. If we go to the corners, maybe a bit less good actually than either the flattener or the extender. We see more chromatic aberrations and more star shapes going a little bit haywire. So maybe the reducer isn't going to be that great for full frame cameras. Again, I could have a slight spacing issue with this, which, since we see the comets kind of like being all in the direction that goes away from the center of the telescope, I might need another like 0.2 or 0.3 millimeters of spacing. That's the problem when you don't have a Petzval design. But to me, that's like acceptable. And here is the aberration inspector where we can see all in one. I personally think this is acceptable, but again, you make your own opinion, and I'll put the raw frames down in the description again. Now let's have a look at the 60 millimeters lens. In this case, the 60 millimeters objective lens is paired with the flattener. So same story, the stars in the center are perfectly fine. And when we get to the corners, they're slightly less fine. They even appear to be like a little bit kind of out of focus kind of stuff, almost as if there was tilt. But because the story is more or less the same in all of the corners, it's probably not that. But it's like, again, very, very nice. I mean, to me, it's very well controlled. And I don't see any issue with such star shapes. But again, I am not super demanding. I am not a pixel peeper. That's why raw frames, check on your own, tell me what you think. And the story is pretty much the same with when we look all at once with the aberration inspector. Yeah, I don't think anyone would be, at least I am definitely not displeased with this. And now we are still with the 60 millimeters objective lens, and it's put together with the extender. And stars in the center are good, and stars in the corner are actually really good as well. Like almost no issues in the corners. Yeah, really, really good actually. So I don't see any issue, maybe a little bit like getting cometish here, but really you have to be pixel peeping to find issues. This is how it looks on the aberration inspector. Looks perfectly fine to me. And finally, I'll have a look at the 60 millimeters objective lens with the reducer. And this is the result that we get. Again, in the center, everything is fine. And if we go to the corners, a little bit of chromatic aberration, slightly like they get slightly out of focus, it seems a little bit like softer stars at the edges, at least with my APS-C size sensor. But again, very decent. I get the feeling actually that the 60 millimeters lens together with the reducer performed better than the 80 millimeters lens together with the reducer. But either is working perfectly fine. And this is the aberration inspector for this image. And to finish it off, let's have a look at the image of M101 that I took last night after doing the test for each of the configurations. This image is with the 80 millimeters objective lens and the extender for the 600 millimeters focal length. And it seems to have gone pretty well. I have done a quick processing of it. This is once dynamic background extraction has been applied. And this is with the image stretched and some color saturation adjustments. And this is a really nice little star field. This was with the very strong winds that I mentioned earlier in the video. If we go back to the very initial image, we can see the stars in the center are fine, slightly elongated, I would say because of the tracking issues throughout the night, but in the corners the stars look, you know, out of a stack. I don't see that much chromatic aberration that is apparent. It looks very, very decent, at least in my opinion. One thing that I did notice, and this is because Sharpstar cannot beat physics, is how the focus shifted throughout the night. The green curve here is the half flux radius. And the red graph is the number of stars detected in each image. There is a spike in HFR, which is bad here, and also lowering of the number of stars. I assume this is due to tracking issues, but we can see towards the second half of the night, after roughly 1 a.m., we see a gradual increase of HFR. And this is due simply to the fact that at that time it gets really cold really quickly, so we have a big temperature change, and the telescope was indeed affected by that temperature change, with the HFR going from 2.17 pixels to over 3, almost 3.1 pixels. So clearly getting worse. So as always, the telescope should be paired with an automated focuser so that the focus can be restored throughout the night, so you can keep like an optimal HFR kind of figure. Now, of course, this is a single sample of the telescope. It might have been handpicked by Sharpstar, I have no idea, but optically, at least as far as I can tell, it performed really, really well, and I get the feeling it could perform even better if I added something like 0. something millimeters of back focus, so of distance between my sensor and between the corrector's flanges. So please be aware of that, and check for yourself the raw frames that I'll put in the description, because again, these are my impressions from my own criteria. Your criteria may be different. Let me know down in the comments what else you would want to see from this telescope, how you'd want me to use it while I have it on loan during this review periods. While you're going there, you could like the video, join the channel, or even like become a Patreon member to support me and to help me build and make more of those videos. You guys truly make the channel possible. Thank you so much. And just by watching, just by liking, just by commenting, you're telling YouTube that the video is interesting. So this also helps out a lot. Thanks so much. With that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget whenever you can to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.